Welcome back, guys. Happy Wednesday. I think it's Wednesday. I record these in advance. I'm pretty sure today is Wednesday. And so we're going to read chapter 2 of Gooseberry Park. And we are going to meet a new character in this chapter. Her name is Gwendolyn. And I'm going to show you a picture because that's what starts our chapter out. And maybe you can figure out who Gwendolyn is. You ready? There's Kona. He's looking at a tank and a shell. I wonder if that tells you who Gwendolyn might be. Gwendolyn, are you awake? The dog pushed his nose up against the clear glass bowl and looked inside cross-eyed. It was a cloudy night, and only the warm glow of the gas lamp outside the window gave any light to the room. The Labrador concentrated his attention on the glistening shell lying in the bowl. Do you have any guesses yet of what Gwendolyn is? Gwendolyn! Scritch, scrape. Gwendolyn slowly turned herself around and put her hermit crab head out to meet the large, dark eyes staring in. Did you know it was a hermit crab? It's a good guess. Lovely evening, isn't it, Kona? And nearly a full moon. I can feel it in my bones. You have no bones, Gwendolyn, said the Labrador. Figure of speech, dear. Figure of speech. I expect it's simply the memory of a time when I did. Perhaps I had even more bones than usual. I may have been a hawk in a previous life. Hawks are nothing but bone, I hear. Have you been watching public television with Professor Albert again? Well, said the old crab, smiling. Amazing birds of prey, if you must know. Personally, I'd rather be all tucked up and dreaming of the sea, but Professor Albert is such a dear, and he does love the company. I take him to the park, said Kona. I try to give him company, too. You try at everything you do, dear Kona, Gwendolyn answered. That is why I like you so. Kona wagged his tail proudly. I have some wonderful news for you, Gwendolyn, he said. Wonderful. First, tomorrow should be a high of 52 degrees and partly sunny. Excellent, said the crab. So kind of you to watch the evening weather report while I'm napping, dear. So kind. Oh, I do love the weather. I'm nearly certain I was a sheep in a past life. Sheep are very weather sensitive, you know. There's Gwendolyn, dreaming of being a sheep. I didn't know, said Kona. And guess what else, Gwendolyn? Sunrise at 6 o'clock, said the crab. No, said Kona. Babies. Babies at 6 o'clock? Oh no, just babies, answered the dog. Real babies. Well, not real babies like dog babies. Real babies like squirrel babies. Stumpy Squirrel is expecting. You don't say, answered Gwendolyn. Any day now, added Kona. Lovely, said Gwendolyn. She's building a new nest in a pin oak on the east side of Gooseberry Park, and she's organizing her collection. How exciting, said the crab. She's dashing about like I've never seen her do before, Kona continued. And you know how Stumpy can dash. I do, said Gwendolyn. You've mentioned it many times. Oh, yes, I suppose I have, Kona answered. Every time I see her now, she's running in circles with a mouthful of rubber bands or ice cream sticks or maple leaves. The nesting instinct, said Gwendolyn, waving a claw in the air. Happens every time. Gwendolyn explained to Kona all about the nesting instinct. And as the night lengthened, the two friends talked on. Kona was glad to have Gwendolyn share his excitement about Stumpy's new babies. Kona's favorite animals were squirrels and hermit crabs. He wasn't terribly fond of dogs, though. Dogs could be rude and loud, and leave it to a dog to tell everyone your secrets. Squirrels never told secrets, nor did hermit crabs, especially ones who had been reincarnated 17 times. Gwendolyn let Kona dream aloud about the prospect of being an uncle. She smiled with affection as he explained the way he thought young squirrels should be raised. She laughed when he predicted he'd have children catching a frisbee between their teeth by July. Babies were on their way, and it was exciting. I'm going to read you 2 chapters today because that one was pretty short. Chapter 3 is called Friends. Kona had been born in the family room of a 5th grade teacher on Paradise Lane. Stumpy had been born in a sugar maple near the south entrance of Gooseberry Park, and Gwendolyn had been born in a palm tree on an island somewhere in the Caribbean. It was a miracle that the 3 had ever found each other. Of course, this was mostly Professor Albert's doing. He was a retired biology professor who loved to grow daylilies and listen to the saxophone. Professor Albert had never married, liked living alone, and all the years he was a professor, he never minded the fact that he had no family. He was too busy teaching the cell structures of amphibians. But after he retired and found himself home so much of the time, he began to grow a little lonely. And when he started talking back to the radio, Oh, yes, I love outpatient care, too. He realized he needed a pet. So he bought himself a hermit crab. She was the loveliest of all the crabs in the pet store. Her shell was creamy white with wavy brown lines flowing across it. She was quite big, twice the size of the other crabs, and Professor Albert found her enchanting. So he brought her home from the store in a little paper box, named her Gwendolyn, and became her friend. Gwendolyn turned out to be a wonderful companion. Professor Albert carried her bowl from room to room in the house, depending on what needed doing. If he was in the kitchen baking banana bread, Gwendolyn was on the kitchen counter. If he was in the living room watching television, Gwendolyn was on the coffee table. If he was writing letters in his study, Gwendolyn was on his desk. Professor Albert knew that Gwendolyn liked him because she always pulled her head far up out of her shell to look at him when he talked to her. Gwendolyn, did you know that each giraffe's markings are unique? As the professor spoke, Gwendolyn's delicate antenna moved gracefully back and forth, and he knew she was listening carefully. Having been a teacher, he was quite good at picking out careful listeners. We are very good at that. It was nice having her. Professor Albert was very happy with his hermit crab, and he had no plans at all to get a dog. He didn't know he needed a dog. He had never even thought about it. But one day one of his neighbors, who had a sister who had a son in the 5th grade class of a woman who lived on Paradise Lane, told Professor Albert about the teacher's brand new litter of puppies. 12 in all. 12! The professor could not imagine so many puppies. He tried imagining 12 hermit crabs, so many bowls to carry. How did anyone manage 12 puppies? His neighbor said that the puppies were chocolate Labradors. Chocolate Labradors? You guys know what that is? I think Mrs. Ely's dog, I can't remember which one. Is it Earl? Is Earl the chocolate Labrador? That's what a chocolate Labrador looks like. The professor imagined children finding these instead of chocolate rabbits in their Easter baskets. The neighbor said the puppies were round like beach balls and that they loved to play. They played and played and played. And when Professor Albert heard this, something lit up inside him. Something from when he was a boy. It had to do with dogs and playing. And before he knew it, he was telling his neighbor, I would like to have one of those puppies. So Professor Albert found himself in the family room of a 5th grade teacher on Paradise Lane, with 12 fat little puppies running all over him and all over each other and all over everything else in the room. He was delighted and overwhelmed and could hardly catch his breath, and he wondered how he would ever choose just one puppy from so many. They all looked pretty much the same. Should he just pick one up and go? But as he was trying to figure all this out, one of the happy puppies crawled into his lap and stayed. It stayed and stayed and stayed. The other puppies romped across him, licked him in his face, ran off somewhere else. But this puppy stayed. The 5th grade teacher said to Professor Albert, of them all, that's the one who likes to be held the most. He likes company. He'll be glad when he's the only puppy somewhere. Professor Albert smiled. He knew all about liking company, and this little puppy was staying. He took the puppy home, and he named him Kona, after his favorite coffee. And there in that house, Kona grew up. Of course, Gwendolyn and Kona became best friends right away. Though Professor Albert couldn't understand Gwendolyn's language, Kona could, and very quickly, Gwendolyn assumed the job of puppy training. Now, Kona dear, you're not allowed to chew Professor Albert's slippers. No, Kona dear, dogs do not eat encyclopedias. No, Kona dear, you must wait until you are outside to do that. Do you want to go outside? Then sit at the door and bark for Professor Albert. That's right, bark. Kona did everything Gwendolyn told him to do, and Professor Albert said to everyone that raising a puppy was the easiest job in the world. This amused Gwendolyn very much. It was a few more years before Kona met the little red squirrel called Stumpy. Gooseberry Park was a very large park with many trees and many more squirrels, and to Kona, of course, all the squirrels looked alike. Kona went to the park every day with Professor Albert, and while the professor read books about snails and baboons and ants and lilies, listening to Charlie Parker on his Walkman, Kona explored the park and ignored the squirrels. Then one day, as he was exploring, Kona came upon a little red squirrel who was trying to pull a plastic toy tractor up a tree. Holding the tractor in her teeth, the little squirrel pulled it halfway up the tree trunk, but the tractor slipped and crashed to the ground. She ran down to the bottom to start all over again. Kona walked over to speak to her. Perhaps if you pushed it, he suggested, as the squirrel began pulling the tractor yet again. The squirrel opened her mouth. What? The tractor crashed. Oops, said Kona. Sorry. The little squirrel ran down to try once more. It's for my collection, she said to the dog. I haven't anything this big. Do you know what it's called? A tractor. I've seen them on television, Kona answered. Television? Answered the squirrel. Kona sometimes forgot the world really did have wild animals in it. He couldn't imagine anyone not knowing what television was. Never mind, said Kona. I simply suggested you push it. Put your paws on the back and roll it up the tree, just like a boy would. Good idea, said the squirrel. And she pushed the toy tractor all the way up the tree trunk and into her nest. She disappeared inside and was gone for several minutes. Kona started to walk away. I'm Stumpy. The squirrel's little red head popped out of her nest just as the dog was leaving. I'm Kona, called the Labrador, happily turning back. What else do you collect? And that is how Kona met Stumpy. He visited her tree every time Professor Albert took a park bench nap, which was quite often. And from Stumpy, he heard tales of life in Gooseberry Park, which he reported back to Gwendolyn, who commented on them as most elderly animals will. Leave it to a raccoon to make a mess of things. Oh, yes, indeed, crows are quite the smart Alex. Well, there's nothing like a young possum to warm the heart. Thank goodness for rabbits. These comments Kona took back to Stumpy, and this is the way they all became friends. It was a fine life. A life just right for babies. And I'm going to stop there for today, but I'm excited about the chapter that I'm going to read to you tomorrow, which is Thursday. I got it. It's called Murray. And they're going to introduce a new character into our story. And I just want you to think about what Murray might be. So there is kind of the picture for the beginning of the chapter. And just as a reminder, here's the cover of the book. I'm going to see if you can figure out who Murray might be. All right, guys, have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.